Hey there, everybody. It's your good friend Eric. It's the Leading Edge Podcast, episode number 40. This one is called Lessons from a Funeral. Now, typically, when I hit every 10 episodes, when I hit the round number, I talk about an influential book, but I'm making an exception because I literally just came from a funeral and I was inspired to make this podcast. So in number 41, I will do a book review for you. So guys, I just came from a funeral and I had a lot of reflections about all kinds of things. And as I was driving home from the funeral, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a podcast. I think there are some lessons here. I think there'll be things to help you out. And also selfishly, this will be a way for me to kind of download and process what's been on my mind related going to this funeral. So you may be wondering, well, whose funeral was it? So the funeral was for my good friend Bill Sumner, my friend and coach and mentor, who I talked about on episode number 8. So you may want to go back and listen to that, either listen to it again or listen to it for the first time if you want to hear all about the lessons that he taught me. He had a brain cancer, and that's why he passed away. And so when we first learned the news, I made that podcast number 8 as a tribute to him. And unfortunately, he recently passed away. So that's the funeral that I just came from. One thing I appreciate about funerals is that they're so real, right? They are just so real. And I think that so often in life, so many times during the day, whether it's things that we experience in person or things that we're watching online or on TV or whatever, we experience things that are not real, right? That are made up. It's people putting on their pose. It's people looking their best. It's people putting on an act, right? People trying to project a certain way about them or a certain lifestyle that they have or whatever. By the way, I'm certainly guilty of that. I'm certainly not trying to exclude myself from that. So what's refreshing about something like a funeral, and oftentimes this happens at a wedding too, is that, again, it's just so real, right? It's so real. They're real, raw emotions that are laid out, both positive and negative, right? So just, lots of crying, lots of laughing in a super authentic, very real way. And I think about all the people that speak during a funeral, the ones that have the courage to go up in front of the crowd and share their thoughts and feelings and share their stories, right? They're always so vulnerable. And it's so cool to watch that vulnerability. And I just have so much appreciation for that, so much respect for that. And it's so refreshing. And I think one cool thing about a funeral is that all of that's expected, right? It's expected, it's encouraged. People, they're certainly not surprised when it happens, and they celebrate it. They encourage it. It's welcomed. It's invited. And there aren't many times or places in our life where that real, raw, vulnerable emotion is expected or celebrated or encouraged or allowed, right? That it's a bummer to go to funerals. I don't like it when I have to go to them because of the reason is someone passed away, and yet they can be really refreshing in that way. The other thing I appreciate about funerals is that it's a time where it just kind of forces you to reflect, right? You can't help yourself but reflect on all kinds of things when you're at a funeral or right after a funeral. You reflect on obviously your own life. You may reflect on other people that were near and dear to you who have passed away, or other people who you can imagine passing away in the near future. You imagine, at least I do, you kind of think about your own funeral, right? You start to wonder about, all right, what's that going to be like? I wonder who's going to come. I wonder how many people will be there. I wonder what's going to be said. And of course, it kicks you into thinking about, what's my own legacy? What do I want to leave behind? And those are all really great, I think, positive things to think about that we probably don't think about enough. And so I think that's another thing that should be allowed more and invited more and encouraged more, is just more time to reflect. Maybe the lesson is don't wait until the funeral until you reflect on those kind of things. So, all right. So I just wrote down a list. I'm not even sure how many things there are here, but just a list of different lessons that I'm feeling that are on my mind that I think are relevant to everyone, that I'm coming up with after just going to this funeral, right? So lesson number one, this first one that came up for me, I just wrote down feel, right? Feel. Feeling is awesome. And what I wrote down is a good cry is good, right? So every once in a while, having a good cry, that's a good thing. Or a really good heartfelt belly laugh, right? From deep down, laughing hysterically. Definitely had both of those moments at this funeral I was at this afternoon. Lots of crying, lots of laughing. And that is such a good thing to feel, right? So the encouragement I give to you is to get yourself into situations where it's likely that you are going to feel, right? Whether it's that movie, that heartfelt movie that's moving, or that, that book or that play, or that maybe that conversation, or that, pulling up old videos of your family or your kids or whatever. Like, get yourself into situations where you're going to feel. And that's kind of the irony of a funeral. It's because I tend to feel really alive when I'm at a funeral, because I'm just having all those raw emotions, those vulnerable emotions. Again, I'm never as vulnerable as I am probably at a funeral, and it just makes you feel so alive. And I think that too often we get into numbing ourselves, right? Numbing ourselves from, maybe the pains and challenges of the world, things that are hard. We like to get numb to that. Man, I think the best thing we could do is go feel it, right? Whether it's good or bad, that's when you feel alive, and just step out, open up, and feel it. The next lesson I wrote down, and this one probably is expected, goes without saying, probably most people walk away from a funeral feeling this way. What I wrote down is live it up, right? Live it up. Live it up. We don't know, right? We don't know how long we have. We don't know what our expiration date is. We don't know how much time is left on our countdown timer. We don't know when the time's up. So all we can do, the best thing we can do, is to live it up, right? Go all in every day. And I made this note that says, make every day a day that you would do over, right? Make every single day a day where you would do over. You're laying in bed at night and you're just thinking, man, I would do that day all over again. And there probably was some hard stuff, challenges come up every day. But again, that's just part of it. That's what makes life. But make every day a day that you would do all over again. Live it up is kind of the obvious lesson that goes along with coming from a funeral. I think tied to that is the next thing I wrote down is no regrets. Bill Sumner, the man whose funeral I just came from, again, really good friend of mine. One thing I know is true about him, he had no regrets, right? He was all in every day. And I think, the whole thought about being regretful, having regrets, feeling that way is just, would be so sad, right? Regret is such a bummer of a word, right? The whole thought of being regretful is just such a bummer. And so the lesson is to, finish things up when we're done with no regrets, right? Don't have any regrets about the conversations that didn't happen or the things that you wanted to do. Just go do them, right? Go all in. Let's all commit to no regrets at the end. Let's not have any regrets. Let's regret-proof our life. I was listening to something the other day, and the woman that was talking said, you know what? My mission is to regret-proof my life. Let's all do that. Let's all regret-proof our life, and that's going to feel just amazing when we hit the end. And I think that would be such a lesson that we can teach other people. What a great way to model your life if you're going all in every day with no regrets. The next one I have here for a lesson coming out of this funeral is to allow reinvention. Allow the reinvention of yourself. This gentleman, Bill Sumner, cool story. So he went to West Point. obviously had a really strong military background. He was an Army Ranger, spent several years in the military, really excelled in the military. Then he took that experience into the corporate world and had a lot of success in tech and telecommunications, kind of back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then when that economy, when that particular tech bubble really burst in the early 2000s, that caused a lot of changes in his professional life just because of the company he was working for really changed, and that impacted a whole lot of people. So what he did is he decided to go out and get his master's in social work, and it just blew the mind of all of his friends from West Point and all the people that he knew from kind of that military background. It blew their mind that he would do that, but he really at that point really stepped into his purpose, right? Stepped into what he was really meant to do. He took all that great background from what he was doing and all those experiences that he had, and he brought it with him into his counseling and coaching and training business. And you're never too old to reinvent, right? So allow a reinvention of yourself. You can reinvent yourself at any point in your life, and that can be a really amazing, beautiful thing. And when you reinvent yourself, that also increases the odds of not having any regrets. So allow a reinvention, I think, is a takeaway that we can all get from going to a hard thing like a funeral. But as you look at other people's life and see maybe the things that they went through and how they were able to reinvent themselves, that can be inspiring. So allow a reinvention. The next thing I wrote down was to talk about it. And what I mean is that kind of one thing that's on my mind is I want to talk about my own funeral. I want to give instructions to my family about what I want it to be like. And I think about what a gift that would be. And I think so often, and I've certainly been guilty of this, so often this is a topic that no one wants to talk about, right? No one wants to talk about people dying because it's uncomfortable and it's hard, and you never want to imagine the day, and God forbid that's ever going to happen, and you don't want to start to pre-live that experience, of course, and you don't want to be morbid about it, of course. And I think it can really be helpful though to talk about it. So one thing I've committed to do is I'm going to talk about it with my family, not like all the time, but I am going to give them instructions. I'm going to talk about kind of what my vision would be for my funeral, what I want to have happen, and kind of the setting I would want, and the music I want played, and the vibe I want in the room, and maybe some people that I'd like to speak, if they're still alive, if they're available, if they're willing to talk. I think that'd be a healthy thing to talk about. So I would encourage all of you to do the same thing. And one I guess, gift about this funeral I went to today is that because of Bill's illness that lasted a little while, I'm guessing that he and his family had the chance to talk about today and kind of plan for it, and they could get his instructions on how things wanted to go. But some people don't have that kind of that ability, right? So often people pass away just suddenly, right? Out of the blue, people not knowing it's going to happen, and so you leave the people behind kind of wondering, they can make some good educated guesses, but if you've never had the conversation, they're kind of wondering about how exactly you may want things to go. So talk about it, right? I think that can be a cool thing. It makes it okay to talk about it, give your family instructions. Here's another big takeaway for me, another big lesson. What I have is the question, what gets remembered? What gets remembered at the end of your life? And you know what? What gets remembered, it ain't the shit that keeps us awake at night, right? It's not that. It's not that stuff, right? So what gets remembered ain't the stuff that we worry about, is the irony of it, right? So what gets remembered by everyone else is not at all the stuff that we consume so much of our time and energy with and worrying about. So here's what I heard today of all the people that spoke. Here were the themes, and these are the themes at every single funeral that I've been to. I'm sure this is the same for you as you think about maybe the funerals that you've been to. These are the themes that you hear from the people, whether it's the people who are on stage, at the microphone, or you hear from the people as you're mingling and visiting with folks and telling stories. You're catching up with people. What gets remembered is when they say things like, you know what, here's what I learned from this person. Here's something specific I learned from this person that was so helpful that I'll never, ever, ever forget. Or here's something that they did for me. Here's a story of how they helped me. This is something they did for me that just really sums up the kind of person that they are. I'll never, ever forget that they did this for me. Or, of course, you hear, here is a hilarious story about this person. You are not going to believe this. I know a few people in the room may have heard this story, but not everyone has heard this story. Here's a story that just talks about and tells how this person really is. People remember the funny stories. So they don't remember the stuff, right? They don't remember stuff. They don't remember the things. They don't remember the things that you owned or, the stuff that you had. So, all those things that we can spin our wheels about and get so worried about, that's what no one remembers. And I think about that Maya Angelou quote that says, people don't remember what you say, people don't remember what you do. What they do remember is how you make them feel, right? People remember how you make them feel. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity to kind of make this a filter, right? So if you're ever laying awake at night, if you're ever spinning your wheels or, caught up in a frustration about a certain thing, maybe a filter you can put that thing through is, are people going to remember? Like, are people going to talk about this at my funeral? I think probably not. So use that as a filter to filter out the stuff that just doesn't matter, right? There's so much that we spin our wheels on, that we swirl in, that ultimately doesn't matter. What does matter is the stuff that you can teach people, the stuff you do for other people, making funny stuff happen in your life, helping people out, right? Making them feel a certain way. That's the stuff that matters. So much of it just doesn't matter and doesn't deserve the time, energy, and attention that we give it. The last lesson I wrote down says, don't wait. Don't wait. And I've had this thought, the last couple of funerals I've been to, I've had this thought, as I'm watching this incredible event, heartfelt, funny stories, hilarious stories, sad things, people feeling these really wonderful, raw emotions. The thought I'm having is, boy, wouldn't it be great if the person was here? Why are we waiting until after they've passed away to share all this stuff? Now, of course, you can make the argument that has a whole lot of credence to it, that they are there, they are feeling it, hearing it, experience it. I get that. Of course, you can make that case, and yet I do think, what would happen if we were able to tell these things, if the person were able to hear these things while they were still here with us, right, in the physical world? Why do we wait? And for sure, I'm guilty of waiting, right? There have been times I've been asked to speak at funerals, and I say things that, I've unfortunately never said to the person's face, and I wish that I would have. So think about the people important to you, and what might you say at their funeral, and say it to them, right? Don't wait until they're gone. Say it to them. And if it's awkward to say it to them in person or face-to-face or over the phone, maybe just write a letter, right? Maybe write a letter saying, hey, you know what? Here's some things I've always wanted to share with you, or you should know. Here's some things that you've done to help me, or ways that you've impacted me. Don't wait, right? Do not wait. And that was big time on my mind. Watching this today, I was just thinking, man, I wish Bill was here, and it certainly felt his presence. He was there, but wish that he was here in person to hear all this, to feel all this. Wouldn't that be cool? And so don't wait. So how about you go pick one person who you have something on your mind, something who's been really helpful, important in your life, and go write them a letter. Go say, hey, here's some cool things you've done for me. Here's some ways that you've helped me out, or remember this funny story, or whatever it is. Just don't wait until they're gone. And I think you'll be happy that you did that. So again, this was podcast number 40. This is Lessons from a Funeral. If you want to hear more about my good friend Bill Sumner, go watch or go listen to podcast number 8. In my next one, I will be talking about a book. In the meantime, enjoy life on the leading edge. We'll see you in the next podcast.